You're on the Six Screens Telenetwork, earning the reputation of giving all the right ingredients, uninhibited, in exposing the hard, cold facts about the Watchtower Society. And now, the end Disney.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome in tonight to our live programming. We have a number of live programs coming up on the Six Screens tonight, so you don't want to miss any one of them. These folks prepare and they put a lot of work into the program exposing the Watchtower. So by all means, why don't you listen in, and if you possibly can, muster up the courage and call in. That would be wonderful if you could do that. And you'll see, if you're on YouTube, if you're on Facebook, you'll see the number scrolling across the bottom during the program. Now tonight we've got a number of programs. Like I say, we have got Returning to Light with Roland out of the United Kingdom and his sidekick Chad out of Illinois, and they're doing a wonderful job. Now tonight, have you folks ever wondered when you were younger or even studying Jehovah's Witness publications with your children? There's some pretty drastic publications as far as images are concerned. Images you might not want your children to see. But the Watchtower had no regard for children at all, and obviously don't. We know what they're doing in covering up child molestation and sexually exploiting young children. So why would images that could create trauma in a child's life, why would they be concerned about it? The answer is they wouldn't. But Roland and Chad, it's a great subject. And if you're watching on YouTube and Facebook, you'll see some of these pictures. You know, the My Bible Studies book? Boy, that was a real, that was a terrible book for images being shown to children. They're going to be talking about that tonight. Now, after that, we do the news at 7 o'clock. You want to stay with us for that. Wow, do we have some neat stories to talk about tonight on JW World News. And then at 9 o'clock, Jimmy Bell and Company. They're going to be coming in. They have a program called The Big Picture. It's gaining a lot of steam here on the Six Screen. So why don't you guys try to listen into that program? And then at 11 o'clock, after the storm, we've got two highfalutin women coming out of Houston, Texas, DeLon and Gail. And they'll be doing the program after the storm. And then if you can hang in and you can't sleep tonight, and it's 12:30 or so at night, well, come on and listen to a pasta babe. She burns the midnight oil right here on the Six Screens. And, well, we're looking forward to a program, so stay with us. I just want to make sure that we've got Chad and we've got Roland coming on with us. I'm going to bring you two guys on right now on screen. And here they come. There they go. And we got them in with us. They're waving to you there. So hi. Hello, Roland. Hello, Chad. Looking forward to your program tonight. So I'm going to cut you guys loose. I know what you're talking about. I just mentioned it to the audience. So I'll step on the background. I'm here if you need me. And just let me know when you want the pictures up, Roland, and I'll put them up. Okay. Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, greetings.
What's up?
Yeah, I'm good, buddy. How are you?
Doing great.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. I mean, it's 10 to 11 tonight here, PM. So, but we're still raring to go. We're still ready to talk about the Watchtower and the problems that it causes with children, etc. And so I'm looking forward to having a discussion tonight. We hope that the folks will call in and join in with the discussion and maybe share some of their experiences with either their children or as a child, how they found it all and the issues they had. We'd love to hear from them. So call in by all means. We don't bite.
Yeah. So Roland, we were talking about what we're going to do for this show, and I really am curious as an outsider, and you being a parent, what was it like for you when you were raising your kids in the Watchtower?
Well, there are three kinds of children in Jehovah's Witnesses' eyes. It's an unspoken sort of thought, but it's there. there's a child that's born into it. They've got JW parents, probably grandparents and whole generations. They're born into it. You know, they know nothing else. They've never experienced Christmas. They've never experienced birthdays or Mother's Day, Father's Day, that type of thing. You know, all the joyful stuff. And so there's those type, and a lot of them are often homeschooled. Now, there's nothing wrong particularly with homeschooling, but the trouble is they then don't know how to react around other people. And I found that in the congregation with a lot of them that have been homeschooled, they just had no emotion, no thought for anybody else. They just didn't know how to interact with people. They had a lot of them didn't even have proper manners, I didn't think. You know, they would just walk away from you mid-sentence, you know, so they just didn't have those social skills that you would expect people to have of an adult age. But, you know, and they just had no clue. They was very naive, certainly wasn't streetwise, because they knew nothing else about from apart from the Watchtower's teachings, because obviously, like I say, a lot of them are homeschooled, and that, of course, that's all they're getting. You know, they're not getting the other side of things. They're not listening to the teachers. Although children that do go from JW families to schools, I mean, they may not agree, or they may be told not to listen, but it does sort of go in a bit, and it's got to do, you know, when they're doing these lessons and things, I think. And then, of course, there's the children like my own that was brought into it. They was brought in quite early, actually. One was 4 years old. The other one was 2 years old. When I finally sort of started going to the meetings regularly, and then when I got baptized, she just turned 5, my oldest daughter. So there was those type that have been brought into it. I've had a little bit of experience of Christmas, but so young that they probably didn't remember. And then, of course, adding to that, you've then got children who up from there to, you know, right up to teens. And I know families that have come in, they've been converted, and they've brought the teens in. Everything's had to change for them. And a lot of the teens have had difficulty adjusting to that. And then, of course, in the other place is the worldly children, the children that aren't Jehovah's Witnesses, have nothing to do with Jehovah's Witness families or children, or come to the meetings. You know, they are just worldly children. That's how the JW see them. And of course, the JW children are told not to mix with worldly people. So they're not allowed to go around to the houses after school, usually, to go and play with these worldly children. They're told to almost despise them, not to get involved with them. They're all drug users. They're all, you know, they're all sniffing glue and taking drugs and committing adultery when they're old enough, and, you know, or sleeping around, whatever it is. You know, they always paint a bad picture of worldly children, teenagers, and worldly people, and that has an effect. And my children, I took my daughter to the first meeting when she was about 4, and she kept coming with me after that. And then I started taking my second daughter when she was a couple of years older herself, because she was, you know, it was a bit of a handful with 2 little ones. So my wife wasn't going at that point. You know, she wasn't sort of interested at that point. But so it's just me on my own, and often I'd take the oldest daughter, and, you know, and she was actually quite good. She'd sit through the meeting. She was very quiet for her age, you know. And but then they started to bring me books, you know, my book of Bible stories. Now, I'd read that myself as a child, because I had my first contact with them as a child when I was about 10. And, you know, so I'd read through that, but I didn't really think anything of it, you know, and I've read it with them. And I'll bring the pictures up a bit later, but, you know, there's some very graphic pictures in there, but most JWs are desensitized to it. They don't see it for what it is. And it's to put fear into the kids right from an early age, you know. Look at what Cain did to Abel, and it's quite graphic, you know. And, and like I say, we'll come back to that in a bit. But, you know, it's all this fear factor, and I found with my girls it was very difficult to keep them apart from the world, you know. And it was awful if I was in a park or something with them, and they wanted to go and play with worldly children. I had to say no. I felt bad. They felt bad. And they couldn't understand why. And I tried to explain to them from the JW point of view, you know, but to me, it didn't really feel quite right, but I still went along with it, you know. And right the way through, you know, they sort of, my children were sort of probably more worldly than most, you know, and so they wanted to do things. And I remember one birthday, it was after her birthday. It wasn't her birthday, actually. It was a few months after her birthday. But because she hadn't had a birthday present, and because she'd done really well at school and she'd, you know, had sort of attained top marks and stuff, I decided to rent a limousine and to have soft drinks in the back and stuff, and to take one or two of her friends to the cinema and then to Pizza Hut, and then, you know, back home again. And all the way they'd be having the music and stuff in the back. And I thought it was quite a nice treat. So I said, you can take who you, and she said, well, you know, I want to take, you know, a girl with me who's from school. She's not a JW. And so I thought about it a bit, and I thought, oh, you know what, why not? So so I did. I sort of let her go with this girl. Also, she took a sister with her, I think. No, it wasn't a sister. Sorry, it was a cousin who also wasn't a JW. And they went off, they enjoyed themselves, went to the cinema, went to Pizza Hut, come back, you know, never thought no more of it. Anyway, somehow somebody had spotted them in the cinema, which is miles away from where I live. It's like about, what, 30 minutes or something like that. Next thing I know, I've got two elders coming round, you know, lecturing me, saying that she shouldn't have been with these worldly children, and, you know, I should be more responsible. And in the end, I told them to get out. You know, I said, look, you leave my children to me, and you know, you look after everybody else. You know, so there was things like that made it very, very difficult. But it was all the time just drumming into them. You know, the world was bad. Jehovah, you know, if you turn your back on Jehovah, then you're going to suffer some of the things that, you know, you see in the Watchtowers, you see in the children's books. I mean, there's, it's just really graphic and very awful, you know. So, yeah. So that's where sort of we was at, you know. It was very difficult, and actually my children left first before I did, and then Kirsty, my youngest, she came back. She was in her early 20s then, so she came back, and she got baptized eventually, although I tried to put her off. But then she left again after a while, and I continued to go. And I thought, well, the only reason I'm stopping here was because Kirsty, I didn't want sort of Kirsty to be thrown to the wolves, you know, so I sort of stayed with her. But by the time she got baptized, I'd already decided I wanted to leave, you know. So so I sort of asked her not to get baptized and said, well, look, think about it. You know, it's like, you know, once you've done it, that's it. You know, they'll be on to you. You know, any little thing that you do, that'll be it, you know. But she still went ahead. She got baptized, and but then she was only there a year or two, and then she left, and I carried on going. And I just thought, well, this is ridiculous. You know, I'm going to have to leave. I'm only staying here for Kirsty. But by that point, so she's left. And anyway, now she's actually met a lad, and she's moved down south actually with him, and she's got a job down south, and she's now pregnant. She's now pregnant and expecting my third grandchild. So I've got one with my older daughter, and then I shall have two with my younger daughter now, two grandchildren with her. So you know, so that's a good result. And you know, it looks like, you know, fortunately for her, it didn't mess her up too much. However, with my older daughter, that's not really the case, you know, because she was sexually abused by an elder, somebody we thought was, you know, a close family friend as well as just a member of the congregation. You know, we was all very close at one point, and you know, and I thought I could trust them, and you know, and it turned out she'd been sexually assaulted, and she hasn't, you know, she's never forgotten it, of course. I mean, she wouldn't. I mean, you wouldn't expect her to. And it's, to be honest, it's messed her up a bit. You know, she doesn't want to go anywhere near any churches, any religion. She never likes me speaking about religion or anything. You know,
Yeah.
and she gets really bad depression. She has to have antidepressants on and off, you know. So that's the effect that, you know, it can have on well, it's certainly the effect it's had on mine, you know. So, and I know loads, thousands of others have said the same thing. You know, the treatment they had as a JW child, and the conditioning that they're constantly told, you know, that everything is bad, everything, you know, and if you turn away from Jehovah, you know, you'll be struck down, you'll be, you know, plagued, you'll be burnt like hot dogs or whatever it is. This, you know, it's always doom and gloom with them. All the pictures are of, you know, I mean, even in the Watchtowers and what have you, you know, a lot of the pictures, you know, you got Armageddon, people burning, and, you know, the children are looking at that when they're doing you know, the Watchtower study on a Sunday afternoon, well, Sunday morning, so it is for some, and you know, they see all that, and it's just fear. It instills fear, and it instills controlling, you know, and then of course the parents are fearful for them, so they're probably a lot stricter than they probably would have been. Yeah, so it's not a good combination, you know. It really is. There was a film they brought out, I remember, some years back, called The Prodigal Son. I don't know if anybody else will remember that, but it was sort of heart wrenching, you know. And this witness he'd gone the wrong way. He got involved with another witness who was a bit of a bad lad, like he wasn't the best of witnesses, you know, and he was leading this other witness astray. And anyway, he ended up committing adultery, and the next thing he's back at his mother's and father's, crying and asking for forgiveness, went to the elders, and you know, very tearful, sort of tear-jerking stuff, you know, all emotional blackmail. Absolute emotional blackmail, and that's, you know, and that's how they control them, you know. And the problem is, if you're brought into it from a young age, and or from a baby, and you're born into a witness family, particularly, you know nothing else. You've got no sort of cognitive thinking. You've got no reasoning. You know, you're socially distanced from everybody. You know, and it's you know, a lot of these children end up going on to develop a severe depression. Some of them end up committing suicide because they're just so frightened, you know, of leaving, or they're so frightened that they'll upset Jehovah, or they've upset the parents, or whatever, you know. But they know in their own minds that somehow it's not right, you know. They shouldn't be putting all these restrictions on them, you know. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so carry on, Chad.
Yeah. Well, you know, I was just thinking, because I, you know, having never been a witness and never grown up around it, I remember when I was younger and I was in grade school, I remember there was one girl who was a JW, and I think there was a boy that was a JW as well. And, you know, I remember with our teachers, we always had some really great teachers, and they never made an issue out of these kids being JWs. And now looking back at it and seeing the kind of damage that can happen through, you know, people not understanding JWs, I can see how these teachers were just so amazing. Because I remember, you know, JWs not being allowed to salute the flag. You know, that was never an issue with us in our classrooms. It was, you know, when it came time to say the Pledge of Allegiance, they were told they don't have to say the Pledge of Allegiance, but they do ask just to stand to show respect. And that wasn't a problem for them. And I remember one teacher we had, you know, we used to celebrate birthdays in the classrooms. And instead of doing that, I remember I think it was my 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Haas. Instead of that kind of thing, she she thought it was important that each kid get a special day. So I remember what she did in our class was she broke it up so that every week a different parent would come in for a day, and instead of having a birthday party the week of that kid's birthday, it was just 1 week. It was randomly selected. The parents could trade off whatever it was. We would come in and have a special time of arts and crafts or just cake or cookies, whatever. And it wasn't to celebrate a birthday. It was just every single week it was something like that. And that way no one ever had to feel excluded. But now looking back at it, it's like, man, I can feel bad for these kids, because when they weren't in the classes I was in, I can see how they must have felt excluded, and they must have felt, like they weren't part of the crowd. And I can only imagine the type of damage that did to the kids psychologically. And it wasn't even a matter of them, feeling that we're excluding them as much as with the paranoia that starts. It's more about them being scared of even being present in the classroom when this kind of stuff is going on. And looking back, like, I can see why. I remember the girl that grew up as a JW. I remember when she stopped coming to school, I always wondered why, and it was because we had a teacher that was an evangelical Christian, and even that teacher said, because we were doing a Christmas play, she said, listen, you don't have to be a part of the play, you don't have to do the singing, anything like that, but part of this does go for your grade. So we would like you to help organize the costumes and stuff like that. That way you don't have to actually participate in the play, but I'll still give you credit. And she was happy for that, and she never felt excluded. But I just think about how the mental effect it can have on a kid, because they're going to feel excluded. They're going to start harboring anger. And at first it's going to be directed towards everyone but the Watchtower, because they're thinking, oh, how could they do this? Jehovah must really hate this and must hate them. But then when they start waking up, all of a sudden that hate gets intensified and redirected to the Watchtower. How could they, steal my childhood from me? How could they take away these important milestones of my life? And I'm thinking to myself, just looking back on it, wow. And I've tried over the last few days to make contact with a couple of these people, and that didn't really work out too well. I know the one girl that was a JW, she ended up becoming, when she got to high school, she started having troubles with alcohol while she was in high school. And then it led from that to drugs and other stuff, till eventually her, apparently looking in now, knowing everything I know, she ended up getting shunned, which when I was a kid, I thought, okay, so you were disfellowshipped. I had no idea what that meant and what all that entailed. But she ended up getting shut out from her family. And she ended up getting pregnant and having a kid at 18, and she wasn't married, and things were just so hard for her. I don't even know where she is now, and I can't find her. But I remember she was just very angry towards everyone. And I just felt so sad for her and so bad, because looking back, even though there were classes where she was, part of the group, she wasn't being excluded. I knew there was parts where she was. And, if hindsight was foresight, I probably would have tried to be more of a friend to her. But I do remember the boy, he was, he tried to be part of the in crowd, and he tried to have friends, and it never really worked out for him. I was always a loner. I was always out on my own, doing my own thing, didn't really care. But he never fit in anywhere either. And I remember one time we tried to play together when we were kids. And I think I was in like grade 5 at this point, grade 4. And I remember we got together to play, and I thought, you know, it's great, we're starting to become friends and everything. And he said, well, we can't really be friends, and we'll never really be friends. And I said, why? And he said, well, there's just stuff you don't understand. And I'm like, okay, so explain it to me. And he's like, well, God hates you. I'm like, well, I'm not too thrilled with him either, but what's your point? He's like, well, I'm a Jehovah's Witness. I'm a friend of God. You're a worldly person. You're not one of God's friends. You're one of God's enemies. And I'm like, okay, so you can't be friends with someone just because they have a different view than you do? And I'm sitting here thinking, you know, looking back at this today, right now, I'm thinking, wow, we were having a really adult conversation, something you'd expect in high school or college or later. And we were like 10 years old having this, 9 years old.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just can't imagine that.
No, well, that's it. I mean, that's how sort of, you know, that's all they're taught, though, you see. They're just taught, you know, and they're expected to act maybe older than they actually are, you know, and that's the other thing, you know, they're not allowed to be children a lot of the time, you know, they've got to sit perfectly still in the meetings. If they make a noise, you know, I would see parents take the kids out the back and they'd be absolutely walloping them on the backs of their legs. And, you know, and it was very much of a case of spare the rod, spoil the child. Well, with them, it was use the rod and beat the child, you know, that was their motto, you know. And so, yeah, I mean, it's the children just had absolutely no life whatsoever. And it's no wonder that some of them end up, you know, with drink issues, mental health issues, you know, because they're just not allowed any life at all, you know, and they just don't know what's going on. And I also believe that it leads to deceit, because a child that sort of knows in its own mind it doesn't want to be a Jehovah's Witness, you know, they'll go and do stuff, and the parents won't be aware, because obviously, you know, they've told them they're going shopping or something like that. They go off with somebody, you know, you don't know what they're getting up to. But, you know, because they daren't tell the parents, they daren't sort of, you know, they're leading a double life, but they daren't tell the parents because they don't want the hassle. And if they're baptized, you know, they don't want to get disfellowshipped and lose the contact with the family, especially if they're quite young. But they just, you know, they just, to me, I think it just it's dangerous, you know, because at least with my girls, they were fairly honest most of the time. And, you know, and I wasn't quite as strict as other JW parents. In fact, I was very lenient compared to a lot of them. But still, you know, they was brought up to respect me and to respect God. But, you know, but at the same time, I wasn't over the top with it, you know, so especially towards the end when it was getting towards teens and stuff. You know, by that point, I was getting a bit fed up myself. So, you know, they knew that they could tell me if they'd been up to mischief or got into any bother, you know, they weren't scared to come and tell me. They're still the same now. They'll still come and tell me stuff that, you know, and the most JW parents, they don't know half of what their kids are getting up to. I mean, my two girls used to tell me what some of the others were getting up to, you know. They would sort of bump into them in the woods and they'd be smoking cannabis and stuff with different lads, and then they'd go home and tell the parents had been out, you know, just either shopping or just gone out for a walk or something. They'd been with their mates in the woods smoking cannabis, you know. So, you know, so it leads to a lot of lying, and it leads to there's a mistrust, because they can't trust the parents not to go off on one if they are doing something, you know, which, you know, yeah, I mean, that's not good. I'm not condoning that sort of thing. But at the same time, you know, kids are kids, teenagers are teenagers, and they will do these things. And it's about taking control, but not going over, you know, excessively ridiculous and cutting them off and kicking them out of the house as some do. And, you know, or even if they're staying in the house, they're sort of almost sent to Coventry. They're not spoken to, you know, barely. And you only say yes, no, or whatever, or get to bed. You know, that's about it. You know, that's been my experience when I've been in other people's houses when they've had an issue with the kids. You know, if the kids have done something wrong, really wrong, you know, if they haven't been old enough to kick them out, then they've barely been spoken to, you know, and when they have been spoken to, it's been quite blunt. And, you know, and so they get all this, and, you know, it's not healthy, is it? You know, living in that sort of environment, especially as a child. And a child, you know, children are so much more sensitive than adults, I believe, you know, and it's so much more hurtful to a child when the parents just won't be reasonable, or the organisation they belong to won't be reasonable, you know, and they're expecting too much of them, you know, and it's I just have issue with the way that they just completely take control of their lives. The kids don't have a say in it, you know, especially if they're born into it. You know, they get born into it, they go right up to sort of teenage, you know, 20s or whatever. But they don't have a say whether at that point whether they want to carry on as a JW, because if they at that point they say they're going to leave, that's it. They're shunned. You know. Well, how is that? How is that? You know. I mean, to me, that doesn't sort of show somebody's loyalty to God. That is coercion. You know.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you know, I now I'm just sitting here and I'm thinking, you know, what is the next generation going to be like? Because up until, you know, this current generation, JWs were really taught, stand up for the faith, stand up for the organization, defend the honor of the organization, defend Jehovah's honor, be a good ambassador, and fight spiritually. Use theocratic warfare, engage in theocratic warfare. And now, every time you bump into a Jehovah's Witness and you start pressing them for answers, it's no longer answer the question, even if you have to lie. It's now direct them to the website.
Yeah.
So now, at least, you know, in previous generations, the children had to at least engage their brains, and they had to use their brain cells. Now they're being told, nope, just tell them to go to the website for every kind of answer, for every kind of question, every kind of challenge. Just answer them with go to the website. And that, I mean, it's not going, it's going to, I think, honestly, I think it's going to make it worse for the children. And because at least in the old days, the children were having to use their mind somewhat to think.
Yeah.
Now they're not even allowed to do that. And I think it's going to get to the point where if they even talk about anything spiritual and try to answer questions, I think it's going to get to the point they're going to get in trouble for it. Because a big part of the problem in you know, previous generations is, yeah, the Jehovah's Witnesses would get challenged by others' beliefs. And they actually did have to think and engage. And when the Watchtower didn't have an answer, they could go and look stuff up. And, you know, that would bring a lot of people out of the Watchtower, you know, especially discovering about the false prophecies and the false timelines that the Watchtower created.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm really hoping with this next generation not being able to use their brains and engage in any form of critical thinking whatsoever, I'm really hoping it makes it easier to really talk some sense into them. But time is going to tell how that's going to work out.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see. We'll have to see. Has anybody listening in? Anybody want to make comments? We're chatting away here. It's your show as well. So, anybody there?
Hello, Roland.
Oh, hello there. Hi.
Hi. I'm sitting there and listening to you. You were really a great father. I love the story where you rented the limousine for your daughter and had that party at Pizza Hut. I think parents should take note of that. I think if I had a child, I'd copy you. I think that's a great idea. And I think you really worked very hard to bring some life to your children, some kind of a fun life. Oftentimes, I know even with my own girls, things don't work out, and you try to bring them into the truth so desperately. Then when you leave, things can become messy. So I just, commiserate with you, feel with you, and we can always hope that in the future our children will make better decisions toward looking at the future in a different way.
Yeah. I mean, that's that's it. I think, if you give the children a bit of respect and a little bit of freedom here and there, just what they're doing. I mean, I knew what they were doing. I knew where they was going. The limousine driver stayed with them while he was in the cinema. He sat outside in the limousine, but he took them to Pizza Hut, and that was already been paid for and everything. So they just went in, ate, had a few soft drinks on the way back and music, and she thoroughly enjoyed it. And she was, for the next few weeks, I mean, she was really happy, and and I didn't have any issue with sort of dealing with her or anything, because she was grateful that I'd sort of done that, and sort of realised that she needed a little bit of freedom, and that's what I intended to do. And so when the elders come around, started going on at me, and I said, well, they have absolutely no life, because he was accusing me of doing it for a birthday. But the reason I'd done it was because we hadn't had birthdays, we hadn't had Christmas, and I felt terrible. I just thought they was missing out on so much, and but I knew I had to sort of give Christmas and birthdays a miss, but inwardly, I felt bad. I thought they was missing out, on a bit of magic, really, and we shouldn't think like that as JWs, of course, but I did, and so when they come around, started having a go, and I said, well, what life are they going to have? You know what I mean? You would have them locked up in the bedroom 24/7 if it was up to you, and I said, look, what I do with my children, I said, it's up to me. I said, you go run the flock, and I said, and I'll look after my children. Thank you very much. So anyway, they said, carry on. And I said, look, just get out. You're starting to annoy me. So I wasn't very popular after that for a while, but I never was anyway. So sorry, carry on.
The other point that you made that I thought was really good was you made the point that the pictures that our kids look at, sometimes they're more frightening than we realize, and that as Jehovah's Witnesses, we become desensitized to these certain images and pictures. They don't mean anything to us, but they might be really frightening our children, and I had forgotten about that. So thank you for mentioning that, because that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is with the picture, we'll bring them pictures up. Have you got the pictures, Rick? We'll bring them up now, since how it's been mentioned.
Hi, could I chime in?
Oh, yes, certainly. You carry on. Yeah.
Hi, I'm from California. I'm Kim from California. I just want to add, I was born in '63, born in. My mom had come in when she was 20, I think. And so I was brought up as that, and I had anxiety as a child. And I remember always, I'm an artist, by the way. I do portraits and things and landscapes and stuff. And I remember drawing a lot of sad-looking kids and a lot of sad people because I saw it in the artwork, I think. I think that's why I saw, and I was trying to figure out why those concerned faces, and I just focused on it in my art as a little kid, and I didn't understand why I was drawing that, but I think it was trying to figure it out. And it scared me, all the pictures, the horses with the crazy eyes, all these horrible pictures. And I remember doing Watchtower studies, looking at them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Carry on.
it was scary for a child,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I was teaching my children these books, I was going through these different books to learn from the great teacher and various other ones. I was so desensitized to the pictures, and I didn't even think about it. But when I come out of the Watchtower and I started looking at these pictures, I thought that's awful. That's absolutely awful, because it's like it's all doom and gloom. There's barely any nice pictures in there. There's one or two of a rainbow, perhaps, after the flood, but the majority are very graphic, very, bleak, and it's like, look, this is what will happen to you if you mix with worldly people, or if you become a worldly person. This is what you'll become, and yeah, and it's just so obvious when you stand outside and look in. You can see it, but when you're in there, you just don't see it at all, because you're so desensitized to it, because you're reading it all the time yourself. You've got the Watchtower magazines where there's like an angel, and then you've got you got the rest of the place burning, and police out there with guns, and and it's like just absolute chaos. And it's like with the if you've got a JW wife or something like that in a Watchtower, they're talking about if your partner perhaps isn't a JW, and they always depict them as having alcohol, or they're laid out on the bed half cut, and it's all these things. So you sort of become desensitized to it, and you just expect it, and so therefore when you're sort of teaching your children, but you just don't think about how graphic it really is, and it's awful. So, Rick, are you there?
Do you notice the way they depict the women? They always have them standing in that pose, kind of like they're provocative, or they're always looking at you like they're on the street corner. I mean, all the pictures of the women, even Eve, all of them. And even in the videos, the girl's always taunting the guy. It's just always trying to blame it, I guess, on the girls. And I had nightmares and everything, and I couldn't figure out too, why was I dreaming things like fire coming down or fireballs? And I never saw movies like that. And then I looked back and I remember it was in the artwork. Anyway, I just wanted to add that and let you keep going.
Oh, thank you very much. Thanks for calling in. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
You got anything? Oh, sorry. Yeah, thank you. You got anything to say, Chad?
Yeah, it's just hearing all this. I can't imagine, because it's not the things a Jehovah's Witness child thinks of is so incredibly different than the things a regular child thinks of. There's so much indoctrination towards negativity. It's like there's no positive reinforcement going on. I know for me, I was an atheist as a child, whatever. And for me growing up, there was kids who went to Sunday school and they went to church, and then there was the Jehovah's Witness kids, and there was such a huge difference. I could even see it. I didn't realize it right away of why, but now I do understand why. But the difference was the Jehovah's Witness kids, they always seemed sad. They were always scared of getting in trouble. They were always almost paranoid. They were very quick to cry and break down over little issues. And the other kids, the ones that went to church, they were friendlier. They were easier to talk to. They were kinder to the other kids. They never thought of themselves as better. Well, depending on what church they went to, but it was just night and day.
Yeah, yeah. And we have children in the church I'm in now, which is an evangelical born again Christian church, and we have children in there, and they're allowed to be children, and some of them are homeschooled. I mean, they are, but they're completely different to the JW children that have been homeschooled, because they're allowed to have interaction with children who aren't, even if they don't go to the school with them. They're allowed to interact, and they're allowed to go to college if they want to, or whatever afterwards, or university. There's no restrictions there. We sort of tell them to make the most of their lives, and as long as God's in it, that's fine. But the JW children, I mean, they're not allowed to go to university. They're not allowed to go. Well, it's frowned upon. They put my daughter off going to university for my youngest daughter for a while. She was working as a receptionist in a doctor's surgery, and she wanted to go to university to study law. I mean, she did in the end after she'd left them, but the JW sisters that she used to go on the ministry with put her off, and said, well, education won't be any good. You're better off putting your time in the ministry, just doing a part-time job. And that's what she did for a while, and then she left, and then she ended up going to university, and she passed a law degree, but I mean, I was furious because they didn't, I was there trying to encourage her to go because, by that point I'd had enough of the JWs anyway. I was like on the verge of leaving anyway, and I was PMO. So I was sort of quite furious because they're interfering with me as a parent. I want her to do well, get all the education she needs. And, and even if Armageddon was just round the corner, well, so what? We don't know for certain when Armageddon will come or whatever. I mean, nobody knows the hour of the day. They quote that often enough. So saying it's just round the corner and putting kids off going to school, well, they've been doing that for the last 100-odd years. I mean, some of the elders said to me they'd got children, they'd got kids that was in the 50s. And they said, when we first joined, we didn't think our Steve would even finish school. He's now 50-odd years old. Well, he's 60-odd years old now. And I mean, so they've missed out on all that. They missed out on all that education. They missed out on all that connection with the worldly children, all the fun that they have going, playing at, being whatever it is they're playing at, and they miss out on all that imagination, because they're not allowed to have imagination. That's the thing, there's no...
Right.
There's nothing for them. I mean, whatever they do, it's wrong. It's like, they're not allowed to go to a nightclub and or a pub, and they're not allowed to sort of mix with the girls unless they're chaperoned, and and that's fine. But it's about trust. You've got to trust them, and the JWs don't trust anybody. That's the problem, and they certainly don't trust children. And the way they treat the children is absolutely awful. I mean, you've heard Stephen Lett just recently saying they're an enemy of God. Young children. I mean, and yet God says the opposite, but they don't, they just, everything is wrong. Everything is doom and gloom. It's all fear control, and it's having a major effect on young ones. I mean, I know one girl, I mean, the whole family was a JW. She's the same age as my daughter, my oldest daughter. They used to go to school together. Mm-hmm. Now, her granddad was an elder, her dad's an elder, her brothers and, her uncles are an elders. Her sisters in Bethel in Germany, or was anyway, as a special pioneer, doing stuff over there. And so, she had basically all her family were JW. She had nobody. And she ended up meeting a lad who wasn't a JW, and she ended up moving out with him. They all disowned her, disfellowshipped her and everything. Nobody would speak to her. And then she ended up in a mess, because the lad sort of took her for her money and what have you. Now, had she been able to speak to her parents about it, had that been my girls, I would have had a good long chat with them, with her, and I'd have said, look, let's think this through. But I wouldn't have been going on banging on about, oh, how does Jehovah feel about this? How does, I would have just had a sensible discussion with them and weighed up the pros and cons. But they've got no choice. If you're a JW child or a JW member, then you've got no choice. You do as they say, or you basically you're spiritually killed. You're shunned. You're no longer alive to them. That's what they say. You're no longer alive to us. Well, that's a big thing for a youngster to take. I mean, I knew another one as well, actually, lives just down the road. He was a young lad. He was one of the ones, actually, that was smoking cannabis, come to think of it, when my daughter was telling me. And he ended up committing suicide because he just couldn't cope with being, because his parents were putting so much pressure on him to be a JW, and he didn't want to be. And of course, they were shunning him, and he ended up committing suicide. And then they was all sad and like, well, you know, I mean, you know, I'm sorry, but, you know, it's awful and all that. But they could have stopped that. They could have prevented that simply by just, you know, accepting him for who he was and accepting the fact that he doesn't. I mean, you know, I want my children to know God. I want them to come to church and what have you. But at the end of the day, it's between them and God. It's no good them coming
Right.
just because I want them to come, because they're coming for the wrong reasons. You know what I mean? You've got to find God in your own heart if you're religious and you believe that, so, which I do. But you've got to find God in your own heart. You can't be forced to love God, because if you do, all it does,
Right.
you know, it turns the child against God. You're stumbling the child, and we know what it says about stumbling children. Better that you put a millstone around your neck and be thrown in the sea. You know,
That's right.
and
Could I
yeah.
add something? I'm sorry,
Yeah,
I
go
didn't
ahead.
interrupt. That was
No, it's all right. Carry on.
I was going to say they install not only a fear of displeasing Jehovah, but they bring the element of the demons. And I remember being told, oh, if you say something, the demons will know what your fears are, and they'll use them against you. And so I remember growing up being afraid to say it out loud, what was going on or what I was afraid of. So then I kept everything inside. So I started having anxiety and stuff like that. And they also bring like the martyr attitude. They make you feel like, oh, you're persecuting for God, and you know, so be ready. And I actually did get persecuted at school because I didn't salute the flag. And it was in front of the school. They had like a assembly thing, and they invited a police chief and the fire chief or something, and they stood us in front of, you know, like near the flag, and they called me and my twin brother, and we were the only JWs there, and they stood us there, and then I think it was the principal lady, because I can't remember who it was, but they slapped us in the face, and I never told my mom, because I thought, oh, see, I'm supposed to do that for Jehovah, and I had that personality, like that thought, you know, but
Yeah.
thankfully, later on, I forgot about it, and my brother reminded me, came back. And, well, anyway, I'm glad, though, that I actually did make friends on my own, and then I ended up fading a couple of times. And I did go to college, and I had also therapy for other things, you know, depression and things. And so I feel like I did learn tools, which helped me wake up and, you know, fully by 2018. But one of the big things that I finally was able to do was research. And because the thing is, as long as I didn't research, all those other fears kept coming back at me. And I know right now they're using those on everybody. They're playing old songs to get you to think, see, this is lovely and beautiful. But yet when you're there, they're terrifying you and telling you scary stories like persecution and all that. Like in Ukraine, right now they're using Ukraine a lot for that. And so that's how they keep people captive and recaptivate the ones who are faded, because they've got it in them. So for like your daughter, I would say it would be really good to encourage her to do some research, or to somehow get it in front of her so that she won't be afraid to. And that will help her to be strong and not fall prey to them in the future, to study again or something, you know.
Yeah.
Use
I don't.
avenue.
I don't think she will study again in the future, to be honest with you. She did come a bit close to it before, when I first sort of left just before I left the JW, before I handed in my disassociation letter, and she was there saying to me, oh, you know, I don't think you're doing the right thing. I don't think you're doing the right thing, you know, and I think, you know, you need to stay in, because, you know, what would Jehovah think, you know? Yeah, she wasn't going herself, but she wanted me to go. And you know, and I said, well, you know, you're not going. She said, yeah, but I might do. I'm thinking about going back. And I said, well, you know, and we sort of started discussing things as to why I thought they were, well, why I knew they were wrong, bringing up the prophecies and the you know, the old light, new light nonsense and various other things, and using scripture. And I think eventually, you know, I sort of, you know, I got through to her, and when I got baptized in my new church, she came, although she was still technically, well, she still is technically a JW, because I don't know what she's been up to. So she's still just basically a, you know, inactive JW as far as the elders are concerned. They don't even know she's left. But she came to the church, and she actually, you know, she filmed all me getting baptized. She held the towel for me, and you know, and I sort of knew at that point, I thought, well, she wouldn't have ever gone into a church. And then she came with me to the Easter service and stuff. So, you know, I don't think she will now. I think she's convinced that, you know, that they're wrong. But yeah, it is a danger. This is a problem. And especially if they've got family in there, you know, they're just coerced to go back. And it's just not fair. It's got to be against human rights. It's got to be. I mean, you know, yeah, it's awful, you know. So what time are we? 22. Right, yeah. Just keeping an eye on the time there. So anyway, thank you, caller. Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you for your comment.
Yeah, and I think she brought up a good point of, you know, taking so much time to come out of it. You know, the damage gets done because these kids, they're not only being lied to, but they're being programmed at a young age to think all these negative thoughts. And, you know, kids who are young and impressionable, they can only comprehend so much. And like with the pictures, you know, if Rick could bring those pictures up, it'd be great. But like with those pictures, it's like some of those pictures are graphic, and you know, they may be accurate, but that doesn't mean they're appropriate.
No, that's what I was thinking. It's not that they're not accurate so much, but it's the fact that they're not appropriate. You know, this one here, you know, I mean, if you see the full thing, you know, it's nail through his head, he's got blood running down, and you know, he's obviously in a lot of pain, which we know he was, but you know, it's like, look, this is what the world did to Jesus. This is worldly people for you. This is what happens, you know, when you're in a false religion. You know, you know, you're going against Christ, basically. You know, and it's all these. Have you got the other ones, Rick? Particularly the Cain and Abel one. Yeah, I don't know. I can't actually see that. Yeah, but I mean, they're there. You know, they're all getting bits. There's you know, there's the snakes biting them, and you know, and this is disobedience to Jehovah again. You know, it's not inaccurate, but it's just the graphic of it. Look, this is what happens when you disobey God. You know, you're going to be struck down. Basically, you're going to come a cropper. You know, Job there, even that. You know, this is what Satan does to the faithful. So expect it. But look at how diseased he is, you know, and how graphic that is. You know, this is evil for you. This is what happens, you know, if you get involved, and you know, and you're basically part of that. You know, it's all very direct, and it's very, you know, I mean, it's quite shocking, really, you know. And the one with Cain and Abel, I mean, he's got blood gushing from his head. You know, he's got blood down on the floor. You know, again, this is somebody, you know, that has turned against Jehovah, Cain, you know, or he's got jealousies, you know, he's turned worldly. And you know, this is what you're up against, you know, and it's, like I say, again, it's not inaccurate, but does it need to be so graphic? You know, and the trouble is, the whole book is like that. It's not, you know, there's one or two half decent pictures that are acceptable, you know, but But it's all people, in the flood, there's people drowning and crawling out and trying to save themselves. And, again, you have that then to the Watchtower studies and the other studies that they have, book studies and various other studies that the family have, family studies. You add that to all the stuff that they add to it. And what you've got is this picture of anybody that's bad are murderers. They're all, and if you if you get involved with these people, this is what's going to happen. It's like, and you can't trust anybody that's not a Jehovah's Witness, basically. If they're not a friend of the Jehovah's JW.org, they're not a friend of Jehovah. And therefore, they're either murderers, alcoholics, prostitutes, whatever. It's all negative. There's no good in anybody. It doesn't matter if they went off and got the Nobel Peace Prize and were the most wonderful people in the world. That wouldn't matter. They're still worldly, and even if they, and that's what these kids are being bombarded with 24/7. I mean, I've been in houses, I've stayed in JW houses, have got kids and stuff, and if one of the kids has just said something slightly wrong, nothing major, something I would have just shrugged off, it's like, now hang on a minute, well, how does Jehovah feel about that? You've just said that, you shouldn't say that, let's look at this and let's talk about this, from the Bible. And it's like, oh, give it a rest. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I had no time for all that nonsense, unless it was something really serious. If they got into a fight or something, I might use scripture then to try and put them off doing that. But that that's fair enough. That's to save them getting hurt. But and obviously we don't want violence. But the point is, it's every little thing that they do, and then they're made to feel awful if they got these what is it, Caleb and Sophia, is it? Okay, Caleb, something like that. Yeah. Cartoons. They're all sort of, interacting, they're all for younger children as well. Obviously little kids are going to take in, it's colourful, it's bright, and, but it's always doom and gloom. It's always making them feel guilty about something, something minor, or, or they're pushing on them to give them the money, take your money out your piggy bank, like, you don't need that toy, you don't need that comic. How much better would it be to give it to Jehovah? And right. It's all about pressure right from the minute they're born, the minute they can, they've been played. I've known witness mothers play Kingdom Melodies while to the stomachs, when they've been pregnant. They've gone that far, and then then when they've sort of come out, they've read them the Bibles, even though they're babies, they've read them the Bible stories and stuff and the children's books, and as they get a bit older and they start to take interest in cartoons and stuff, they've got this Caleb and Sophia, it's like they're just absolutely bombarded from morning to night, and it's like, then of course they're then encouraged to do a Bible reading or whatever as soon as they can. That puts extra pressure on, because if they are at school particularly, they've got all that pressure at school, and then they've got to come back, do all the research and stuff and do a talk. And obviously then the parents, if they're quite young, like I used to have to do write talks for my girls, they would go up and they'd sort of sit with a sister, and they would sort of do a talk as if they was talking to a householder or something, and they'd be taught how to speak to the householder, how to get them interested in the Watchtowers, and how to get them interested in the paradise and all that sort of nonsense, so they're constantly bombarded with it. And then, on top of that, it's a nightmare for the parents, because they've then got to do that. They've got to sit through, bring the children up, get them out on the ministry in all weathers. That's the other thing, they're out there, sometimes, especially here where I am, it's like near the Yorkshire Moors. And when it snows, it really snows, and we're trudging out there, there's people out there trudging out there with kids. They're absolutely frozen solid. Most of them on a Saturday morning want to be at home watching cartoons or whatever. They don't get that chance. They don't get any of that, because they're having to be dragged out of bed at goodness knows what time of the morning, get bathed and dressed, put the, little suits and dresses on, and go trudging door to door, only to now have to knock on the door and say, oh, go to jw.org. I mean, what's the point? It's just,
Right.
yeah, it's really infuriating, to be honest. It really gets my goat, that does. I used to see these poor kids, it'd be red hot and, in the summer, and then they'd be sweating like mad, they'd be sat in the pushchairs. Yeah, all right, some of them did put some cream on and stuff like that, but they still got burnt because it was out so long, so.
Right.
Yeah. And heat exhaustion. Yeah, sorry, carry on, Corley. Yeah. Hello.
Yeah, I was a born in, and I agree with you about how much the organization infiltrates into your life. My parents, I guess, some people would refer to my parents as Nazi JWs, and what I discovered over the years is that our family was very dysfunctional because of Watchtower. And what happened is my parents and us kids did not have any communication about anything whatsoever unless it had to do with Watchtower, the organization, the publications, anything like that. Nobody in our family ever communicated with each other about actual real life things.
Yeah.
And it just swallowed every second of our lives. And when I got out, I realized how isolated and stunted I was compared to other people my age. I mean, I was basically taught that this system wouldn't last long enough for me to finish high school, so I wasn't taught anything about the real world at all. I didn't know where to go and who to talk to, and because in Watchtower, all your friends are picked for you.
Yeah.
They make this assumption that if they're a JW, that means that they're good people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you didn't have to wonder, are they good or are they bad? How are they going to treat me? Anything like that. It was like having a stamp of approval that says, oh, they're a JW, so they're good, and you don't have to worry about it. Well, that's not even true. There's a lot of JWs that you wouldn't want to be hanging around,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, the thing is, the children aren't safe, are they? They've got, the paedophiles are, there's at least one in every congregation, I believe, but there's probably a lot more. I mean, there was certainly one or two in my congregation, and one of them abused my daughter. Well, that's put her off God for life. It's put her off, going to any religious meeting, and it's just so they're not safe, and not all JWs are good, but I mean, some of them are generally decent people, are just misled, but but they have got good hearts, some of them, but
right? Yeah, of course.
But the majority, you can't just say, oh well, there's 8 million JWs plus in the world, nearly 9 million, whatever it is they're saying now, and and that every one of them are good people, because we know that's not true. We've seen the court cases.
What they say, though. They say, oh, they're all your brothers and sisters.
Yes, they do.
You trust them.
Yes, you do. And that's the thing. And the children do trust them. And they call them uncle and auntie, don't they? So they're like family. It's uncle so-and-so. It's even if they're not blood related whatsoever, anybody that's older than the children, if the children aren't, particularly if they're not baptized, so they'll call them uncle and auntie. Well, they certainly did here. And, so they're building up that family relationship. Oh, he's an uncle, he's an auntie. Well, uncles and aunties won't hurt the children, will they? But they do. The guy that sexually assaulted my daughter, he was an elder, and he was in his 70s at the time. He's now in his 80s. He was in his 70s at the time. And he'd got all granddaughters. My daughter was friends with his daughters. with his granddaughters. And, you know, and so I trusted him. You know what I mean? He was an elder. You know, he seemed like you know, he had a family together, and he's you know, he got a lot of granddaughters. So, you know, I just trusted him. But, you know, but he's proved, you know, that you can't really trust anybody, you know, but just because they say they're a member of a religion, or just because they say they're good people, you know, it doesn't mean a thing. I mean, the other quick thing I would like to mention as well is the fact about the blood issue, because right from an early age, they're teaching them how to refuse blood or why they don't accept blood, you know, and they're not given any choice about that. So if they're like getting up to the age of 12 or whatever, at least, you know, they're sort of, they have to, you know, they've been practicing how to talk to a doctor if they happen to end up in a hospital themselves without the parents for some reason. You know, they're told, they're instructed why they don't want blood, and they're just sort of parrot fashion almost. You know, you say this, and so they say that to the doctor, and you know, it's just, but they've got no thought about it. They just think, oh well, if I do, you know, I'll be upsetting Jehovah, or I'll be upsetting my parents, or I'll be upsetting the elders. You know, they're not thinking about the overall consequence. You know, without a blood transfusion or whatever, you're going to die. You know, but no. You know, so that's another thing I have an issue with as well. It's bad enough when adults do it, but I think when they start, you know, forcing children to just do it without even discussing the whole ins and outs of it, it's just they're expected to do that. No particular reason, you know, given. That's what Jehovah wants. Jehovah says blood is bad. Don't do it. End of, you know. So, yeah. But how can a child of that age make a rational decision about anything like that? Or even have any kind of, you know, I just don't, you know, I just think it's awful. And, you know, they're responsible for a lot of deaths. Anyway, sorry, Chad, go on to you.
Yeah. And, you know, I was also just thinking, with all the service time that JW parents have to put in, along with, you know, bringing their kids with them and the kids being exposed to it, what does that do for family vacations? Because I remember when I was a kid, my dad, he would take 2 weeks off work at a time, and he had a very good paying job. It was a great job for him. And even when I was older, he was able to take like 2 weeks off at a time, twice and even 3 times during the summer, or he was able to make up hours. And I remember my dad investing so much time with me and bond with me and teach me about our family, teach me about values. So it wasn't even just a matter, you know, with the JW kids, it all comes from the organization.
Yeah.
For me, it was time sitting on the shore fishing.
Yeah.
My dad was teaching me different things: how to build a fire, how to camp, how to set up a campsite, how to fish, how to clean fish. He was teaching me all this stuff. And with all the service time JWs are expected to have, you're not able to build those strong family bonds.
No,
I remember when my dad died a couple of years ago. Now, I have two brothers. They were never close to my dad. They were from his previous marriage. But for me, my dad invested a lot of time with me, and I was very close with my dad for, you know, years. And I remember at his funeral, I had to preach his funeral, but I was sitting there devastated. And it was so messed up the whole way that worked out. But, you know, I'm sitting there thinking, how, you know, this is my dad, he's dead. And as a non-JW, I was absolutely crushed. My brothers, on the other hand, they had limited exposure to my dad. They were very limited to the time he spent with them. So I could see a huge difference between their behavior and my behavior, their reaction, my reaction, their feelings, my feelings. And
the one,
you know,
the one thing, Yeah, sorry. One thing, because we're getting a bit short on time, but the one thing that
Yeah.
I regret now more than anything is not spending as much time with the children, especially. I mean, I did my best. I spent a lot of time with the children, probably more than most, but
Right.
there was so much time when I spent doing ministry or doing talks, writing a talk for an assembly, or or writing a talk for the Sunday service or whatever it was. I would spend so much time doing that, and then doing ministry. I was doing 60 to 80 hours of ministry, and then I was having to work secular to try and earn some money to pay the bills, because I had to give up a really decent job when my wife died. I was a manager of a supermarket, but I had to give that up because I just didn't have the time between the ministry and the and looking after the children and getting them from school and stuff, and so I had to do all this, and so I didn't spend as much time with them as I probably would have done now, in circumstances I am now, and I do regret that lost time. And that's the one thing as well. I regret that they've lost time, because they've missed out on the Christmases, they've missed out on birthdays, they've missed out on the magic of all that. And we know that it's all sort of rubbish and stuff with the but if you want to sort of have that magic, children know eventually that it's not, that it's but you just can't, they just miss out on so much. They miss out on that association with others, their little adventures, going off biking or whatever it is with other children, getting into a bit of mischief, nothing too serious, but, just being kids. And they're not allowed to do that. And I just think, they must look back when they get older sometimes and think, well, I missed out. But then having said that, they've known nothing different. So I don't know if they do, so, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that's the big thing. If you look at the JW publications, the videos, everything they put out, it shows JWs having strong families and strong family bonds. In reality, the JWs know that's not exactly how it is. They're picturing these absolutely perfect families, and they're not perfect by any means. And I'm not saying any family is perfect, but I will say this: if you do want to have strong family bonds, and you do want to have families similar to the ones that they show, it's not about spending time in service. It's not about making your entire family life revolve around the organization. It's about a father taking his son fishing or hiking or camping. It's about that mom teaching the daughter, family recipes, and taking her shopping and investing that time, personal, private time as a family. That's how you build a family bond.
Yeah, it's so important, and that was my goal even as a JW. It was very difficult, but I think I probably did it better than most, but even so, it was an absolute nightmare trying to fill in everything, because it's just non-stop with the JWs, it's every part of your life, and you've got meetings throughout the week, you've got meetings on Sunday, you've got conventions. Oh, that's the other thing. And then you've got to drag them up to a convention that's about 2.5 hours away, and then they've got to sit there for hours and hours on probably a hard plastic chair, listening to boring people going on, droning on. I mean, it used to send me to sleep, let alone the kids. The kids used to get absolutely restless, and these poor kids were supposed to sit there for 3 days, while these boring old men used to drone on. And it's no life. It really isn't. It's just ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. Oh, and then they have to get dressed up to watch the conventions online now. I've known a family got, I heard the other day, a while ago, actually, not the other day, a few months ago, a few weeks ago, they'd had a convention online, and the mother and father went out and brought them all new suits and dresses and stuff, and this to sit in front of a computer where nobody could see them to watch a convention. Well, I mean, how much did that cost them individually for the suits and the, new suits and new dresses? What, to just sit in behind a computer But even when they go to conventions, you know, they're usually buying new dresses. They're usually wanting to look the best. The kids have got, like, if they're old enough to have suits on, you know, right from being toddlers, you know, they put these little suits, waistcoats on and stuff. And, you know, and the kids just can't breathe. You know, it's just constant JW, you know, bombardment from the minute they wake up to the minute they go to sleep, you know. So, yeah. Anyway, I think we're getting a bit pushed for time. How are we doing, Rick?
Yeah, we're going over time here, Roland, so we're going to have to wrap it up. Give me another minute or so. Yep.
All right. Yeah. Well, I think I'm about done, aren't you, Chad? You got anything
I just wanted to remind the people in 2 weeks we're going to be back, and we got a really lively topic that I think is going to help quite a few people. And I want to remind the people, make sure you tune in next week, in 2 weeks at,
5:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Yeah.
5:45 Eastern, 4:45 Central. We're going to be talking about exit strategies when it comes time for you to leave the Watchtower. What is all the different ways you can do it? And I think that's going to be a really good program. I think it's going to be pretty hot. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in.
Yeah. All right. Well, from merry old England, I wish you all the best, and take care. Nice to have you. Nice to have all the callers in. Thank you for calling in. We've enjoyed your comments. Thank you, Rick, for having us on.
Wow. Good program, guys. Looking forward to 2 weeks. Well, we're going to be going to JW World News. That's coming up next. But if you're listening on Facebook or YouTube, this broadcast will end. Returning to Light will end, and come back in a couple of minutes. We'll be back with JW World News. So we want to tell Roland and Chad, we really appreciate their efforts they put into the program tonight, and may all go well for them. And I want you guys to stay with us. We got a big night of activity here on the 6 screens. We got the news coming up next at 9 o'clock. We've got the big picture. Hey, friends, is the Watchtower part of the coming new reset? Well, we're going to be talking about that tonight. And what about at 11 o'clock? We have DeLon and Gail. They're coming in from Houston, Texas, and they got a program after the storm. And then tonight at around 12:30, if you're pacing the floor and you don't know what to do, your favorite apostate, Apostle Babe, she's coming on tonight at around 12:30 tonight. Be actually Sunday morning, right? But looking forward to it all, and we're going to end this now when we're going to JW World News up next. Thank you all.